Okay, so we are doing the Advent candles, and last week the first candle was lit in our minds and in our hearts, yes. And the first one was God's prophecy, and Pastor Ken talked about Isaiah 52 and 53, and how the whole thing set up and showed us really what was going to happen to Jesus. And it's truly remarkable and truly amazing when you think of 800 years before, 700 to 800 years before, this guy sits down, has a vision, and I'm assuming a vision, and hears from God about what's going to happen. Rome was not a power at that time, and crucifixion had not even been created yet, and yet just word for word, almost everything that was going to happen to Jesus. He was going to be flogged. He was going to be beaten. He was going to be crucified. He was going to be pierced. Pastor said pierced, for a crucifixion, but there was also, if you remember too, he was pierced in his side with the spear. So there was multiple piercings that Jesus went through for us. And it's truly remarkable when you think about somebody from so far long before writing about that. I mean, you're thinking about 700 to 800 years ago. It'd be like somebody writing from 1200 AD what was going to happen to you. Somebody having a vision what was going to happen in your life and writing it down, and then you're reading it and going, oh, wait, that's what's happening to me. Right? That's crazy. It's mind-blowing. But this week we are talking about God's preparation. So we're lighting the second candle, okay, in your mind, picturing it, because we haven't decorated yet. Friday, we'll be decorating, maybe, hopefully, God willing. And so we light the second candle of God's preparation. And so preparation, I looked it up, and it says being ready or to equip, to make things ready. So, the Boy Scouts in the house, be prepared is their motto. It was always prepared for anything, being ready to do what they needed to do in any given situation. And so God is not caught off guard by what's going on earth. Sometimes we think in our situations these things are going on and we're like, oh man, God couldn't have seen that coming. And if you think about Moses and all the things that Moses went through, they came up and here's the people, they get out of Egypt and they're relieved and they're finally going out and there's freedom, and they get to the Red Sea and they're like, oh man, there's a big giant sea here. Right? And then all of a sudden they turn around and here comes Pharaoh and his army and they're coming charging down at him. And the thing would be in your mind is they started thinking, oh, so God let us out here to die. Not thinking that God had a way of escape, but just assuming the worst and thinking, oh man, God obviously didn't see this big sea over here. He must have just taken a wrong turn. What the heck? That Bugs Bunny thing comes to mind, the cartoon where he's like, I knew I should have taken a left at Albuquerque. Just that kind of concept that we think God's like, oh man, no, man, I should have taken a left back here, but now you're in front of this giant sea and there's despair and all the people are freaking out. But God knew exactly what he was doing. And then we see them again, the same people who just see all these witnesses. They see all the 10 plagues, they see the parting of the Red Sea, and then they get out in the desert and there's no water, and they're like, oh, well, yeah, God, you didn't know about that one, did you? There's no water in the desert. What are you going to do now? And God's like, oh, watch this, rock. And then all of a sudden there's water flowing from a rock. God is not shocked by our predicaments, whether they're made by ourselves or not. He has a plan, he's been preparing, and he knows what he's doing. We see that in the story of Adam and Eve, and this is where we're going to start today, Genesis chapter 3. Hold on a second. I don't have COVID, I promise. So in Genesis chapter 3, we see Adam and Eve. They're in the garden, and they're doing all these things. And we don't know how long they've been in the garden. The Bible doesn't give us a specific time frame from when they were created until this situation. It could have been a week. It could have been a month. It could have been 100 years. We don't know. But they're in the garden, and As we know, God gave word to Adam to not eat from the fruit, not eat from the tree. And so they're going along, and pretty soon the snake comes, and he starts tempting them. And he starts mixing in truth with lies. And this is what the devil does, is he mixes in truths and lies. So there's that hint of truth in there, because when he speaks in part truth, there's that hint of truth. So you're like, oh, it must be real. And so he tricks her into going in and eating this fruit. And it's easy for guys to go, well, gosh, Eve, good job. But, Adam was standing right there, and he didn't do anything about it. And then, pretty soon, God comes in, and he's like, hey, where you at? Pastor, I know talked about this not too long ago, and it's not that he didn't know where they were at. He doesn't know what's going on. He's just like, oh, where you at? Just kind of like your parents, when they caught you doing something, oh, what are you doing? Chop it on your face, from eating the cookies. You're like, nothing. I'm not doing anything right now. Okay? And so he goes in, and he starts talking to Adam and Eve. God's talking to Adam and Eve, and he says, well, what did you do that? What did you eat the apple for? And Eve says, the serpent deceived me, and I ate it. So in verse 14 it says, so the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, you are cursed more than all cattle and more than every beast on the field. On your belly you shall go, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. So we could almost put this together with the first two candles, because there's preparation and there's prophecy going on here at the same time. Adam and Eve had made a mistake, and they sinned, and they opened up that door to sin in our lives, and they took all this. But God was prepared. God knew this was probably going to happen. Pastor Ken's like, last week was talking about how God can see all the different outcomes of everything. And so he's prepared, and he knows what's going to happen, and he didn't even wait. He already knew, and he took responsibility to personally be responsible to redeem Adam and Eve and the humans right in that moment. God set into motion that he himself would pay the penalty for their actions. So, verse 15, it's a word we don't use very much anymore, enmity. Enmity? Thank you. See, I don't use it, so I don't. It's kind of like when you get to the Greek and you're like, grr. And it means having a hostile mind, the bitter attitude or feelings of an enemy or enemies, or towards an enemy or enemies. And so God says, I'm going to put this feeling of enemies between you two, the woman and the snake. And so you're not going to be friends. You're going to have this attitude of being enemies. And he says what he's really going to do is he's going to put it between Satan's seed and her seed, which in this case is capitalized, and it's meaning Jesus. And so he's putting this thing, because man's coming from woman, but it's the ultimate seed. It's not just all of the children, but it's going to be the seed. And he says, he shall bruise your head, or crush your head, is another version. And it says, to repay him his evil deeds. So God says, what the devil did, he came in and he screwed it all up. He screwed up the perfect plan of God, but he's going to repay him for that evil deed. And he's going, I always thought, the head is the physical head, right? And in that case, it's going to be kind of both ways. It's the physical head, but it also can mean the top or the boss of an organization. So the head, like the CEO, is the head of the organization. So he says, I'm going to come in. So you get that picture of Jesus coming in with like the snake and crushing his head. But he says that he's going to go in and take out the top or the head of the company, or the head of the evil one. So he's like, Satan, you're the head of the evil one, and guess what? He's coming after you. So he's not just going to come in and wreak havoc. in, the demonic, but he's coming specifically for you. He's like, I'm targeting you. Your days are numbered. There's a price on your head. I mean, if you're Satan, that's, it's one thing to say, yeah, he's going to come and shake up the thing, but he's like, no. He's coming for you, my friend. And I'm letting you know he's coming for you. And he says, Satan will bruise Jesus' heel. So to bruise means to lie in wait or to attack or fall upon. But in the Amplified Bible says that part, and it says, you shall only bruise his heel. Okay, meaning that Christ is going to come in and he's going to crush you. There's not going to be anything left of who you are. And yeah, you're going to inflict some pain on Jesus, but it's not going to be nearly what's going to happen to you. Yeah, he's going to die, but he's going to be resurrected, and he's going to open the door for all of mankind. So God, literally from the start, from the garden, from the very beginning, prepared for redemption. He had a plan to set people free. Our God is a God of preparation. We see the fulfillment of these things through the life of Christ. Last week, Pastor Ken said that there were over 300 prophecies of the fulfillment of Christ, because we were talking about some of them in Isaiah. I had a cool video, but I forgot to tell Dana, so he doesn't know. Surprise! But I'll just summarize it. This is what happens when life goes crazy and fast. So, basically this video says, oh, sorry. I'm not used to a camera. So I'm just like, he's gone. This video says there was over 300 prophecies that were fulfilled in the coming of Christ. So they did the math for 8 prophecies, not 800. 8 prophecies, just 8 prophecies being fulfilled, and it was 100 to the power of 17, which is just a giant number. And so just to wrap your head around that number, this video says if you take Thin Mint cookies, okay, which I saw a lot of, smiles at that thought, Thin Mint cookies, yes, the number 2 selling cookie in the world, behind Oreo. Thin Mint cookies. If you take Thin Mint cookies and you lay out the number of 100 to 17th power, it would be the equivalent of taking Texas and you lay them all out and put all these cookies across the state of Texas. There would be Thin Mint cookies 2 feet deep across all of Texas. Okay? That's how many the number is. And then, still a lot of people are smiling. Yes, heaven. Thin Mint cookies everywhere. And then you take one Thin Mint cookie and you don't put it in chocolate. It has no chocolate on it. And then you put that Thin Mint cookie out in the middle somewhere in Texas. And then you blindfold yourself and you walk completely all around Texas. And while you're walking, you're cruising around and you stop and you bend down while still blindfolded and you pick up a cookie. The odds of finding that one cookie being chocolate out of all that is the same odds of all of those just 8 prophecies being fulfilled by God. When I was in high school, one of my science teachers, yes, back then they still talked about God, said it would be the equivalent of taking a deck of cards. And you take out the cards and you throw them in the air and all of them stacking one on top of each other. That would be the odds of 8 prophecies being fulfilled. So as you can see, the likelihood of 8 prophecies being fulfilled is very unlikely. Now imagine over 300 prophecies being fulfilled. God is a God of preparation. He knew long before he prepared for all those prophecies to be fulfilled, just so we would have historical evidence that Jesus was the Son of God. So what does that mean for us? How does that apply to us? God is still in the preparation business. Ephesians 5. Yes, old school Bible here. Ephesians 5, 25 through 27. Says, 25, there we go. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, and that he might present her to himself as a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she would be holy and without blemish. God is preparing his church. God is preparing his bride. That was Ephesians 5:25. Yeah. So God is preparing his church. He's prepping and getting us ready. We are not a spotless bride yet. We are not completely ready for that moment. But God is preparing us even now. Sorry, guys, from the youth group, I'm going to go a little bit over what we did Friday, but you get to hear it again. Yes. I believe that God lets the devil overplay his hand. And I believe that the devil gets cocky and arrogant, and he thinks that he is smart. And he thinks that he is going to win. And so he does things that plays right into the hands of God. We saw that with the cross. The devil thought, if I can wipe out the Son of God, then I can take authority. And I will be able to have the rulership. And I will be able to win. And so he did everything. And he led all these people. And he started this riot and all this stuff to try to get God to be crucified. And Jesus was led right to the cross because of what the devil was doing. And then we see there was probably a party going on in hell. But the Bible says that Jesus went down into hell, broke open the gates, and took the keys to hell and the power and the authority of the earth back. I think, guys, what we're seeing right now is the devil overplaying his hand again. He's been doing a lot of things. He's been running rambunctious for years and not being called out. And God's been letting him do it. And I think we're seeing that in this election. I'm not going to get, just like I told the kids, we're not going to get political. But what I'm saying is the devil has started to wreak havoc in anticipation of stealing an election. He has started riots on things that didn't bother people for years, and all of a sudden we see looting. And it's not logical rioting. It's crazy rioting. It's like, you killed a person, so we're going to go out and hurt and maim and destroy. Right? We see businesses destroyed. We see people killed. But when you think what the Bible says, God said, Jesus said that the devil came to steal, kill, and destroy, and that's what we're seeing, the evidence in that, so we know who is behind it. Right? He's manifesting who he is in people. And then there's allegations of fraud in the election, and there's all this stuff going on. But see, the devil doesn't think of the outcome of this. He thinks of what it's going to, his outcome of what he wants for all this. What he doesn't realize is that God has been preparing his people. And for the first time in a long time, we are seeing the church waking up. We are seeing the church rallying around, not just standing by. For years, the church has been silent when the devil is doing this stuff. When abortion has been going on, when all these things are going on, the church has remained silent and not stepped up into its rightful place. But now, we are seeing a shaking. We are seeing a reawakening of the church. We are seeing millions of people on their knees crying out to God. And a praying church is a scary and powerful church. The devil, no matter what the outcome of the election is, has overplayed his hand because the church has saying no more. They said, the media will lie to you and say there was no, like a couple weeks ago they had the Million Man mega march in D.C., and they said, well, yeah, there was no one there, or hardly anybody there. And what they don't tell you is, like, they took a picture from the day before, and there's a lady that, she's an evangelist that we've met before, and she was there the day before praying and preparing the ground and evangelizing in the Black Lives Matter mall, or whatever the square in D.C., and she was praying and evangelizing. And so they took a picture of her because she was wearing her mega hat and praying. She's from South Africa. So, she's just believing in God and believing all this stuff. But, so she doesn't really have an agenda other than God. That's what I was trying to get across. And so she's out just praying and evangelizing. And so, of course, there's nobody there but her. So they take a picture of the Black Lives Matter people and her, and then say, well, look, there's only one person there. Right? So they're twisting it. Well, she's like, yeah, I was there Friday and Saturday. And she goes, there was just people. You couldn't see the end of the people. She said there had to have been at least 1 million people there. God is doing stuff. God is moving because the devil has overstepped his bounds. Genesis 50:20 says, this was Joseph, and he says, But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. Preach it, brother. Come on. Genesis chapter 50, verse 20. No problem. A praying church is a powerful church. When Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, this was kind of funny because I didn't realize till after I put this quote in that tomorrow's Pearl Harbor Day. After Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, Japanese Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, who planned the attack on Pearl Harbor, would reportedly write in his diary, I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with terrible resolve. I believe that that's exactly what the devil has done with the church. I believe that he has awakened a sleeping giant and filled him with terrible resolve. Terrible not for us, but for him. Because as this nation starts to realize who we are, there's going to be a move of God. We keep hearing it prophesied that this is a move of God that'll be greater than any other move in history. And if you think about it, statistically, that would make sense. This is the greatest amount of people that have ever lived on the earth. So if you have even like 20% of the population get saved out of almost 8 billion people, statistically, that would just be a massive harvest. But I believe that God is moving and God is shaking us up and he's preparing us for that moment. So the question is, are you ready? Are you getting woke up? Are you getting shaken up? Are you letting God prepare you? If he is the God of preparation, that means he's going to prepare you for what he wants to do in you and through you. Each one of us has a destiny. Each one of us has a calling. Each one of us has a purpose. There is a reason you are here. You are not here by accident. God planned for you to be here. God planned you for this movement. God planned you for this moment. We heard testimony, that they were saying, Maurice has passed from this place and gone to the next place, but he has gone before us, and he has gone and he is calling out for revival in Colfax. What are we going to do about it? Are we letting God prepare us for that moment? Are we letting God prepare us for what's about to happen? Because if we don't prepare ourselves and if we don't get ready, the move won't happen. God is contingent. He's always said, he's been contingent on us doing our part. Because he says, on earth as it is in heaven. God is willing. God is wanting to move. God is wanting to move through us, but are we willing to let him move through us? There's a difference. Joseph had to lay down everything. David had to lay down. All these great people of God had to lay down everything and say, I'm going to let God move through me. I'm going to let him prepare me. David sat out in the fields playing, worshiping, seeking God's face, preparing his heart for the role that he had to play. I believe we are. I believe we are moving in that direction. I believe we are letting God move in us and prepare us. And I am excited to see what God's going to do. It's going to be different than we've seen, because God doesn't do the same thing the same way twice. So I'm going to say be prepared, because it's going to be different. And it's going to be exciting. Because so many times we look back and we're like, oh yeah, remember when God moved? You know, because I've heard stories of when Pastor Stan was here, and there was almost 100 adults in the sanctuary, and there was 20 to 30 kids up in the in the kids' church and all that, and that's exciting, and that's our heritage, and that's our inheritance. But it's not going to look like that. It's not going to be like, oh, well, let's just copy what Pastor Stan did, and we'll see that move again. But God says, okay, are you willing? That's part of that relationship that God wants to have with us. Are you willing to listen to me? Are you willing? Because God doesn't want formulas, because if we had formulas, we would just do the same thing, and we'd be like, A plus B equals C, yay. And God's like, no, but if we do that, we won't have relationship. We'll just have religion. And God says, so if I do things different, you have to press into me. And if I do things different and you want to hear it, if you want that breakthrough, you have to become, relational and hear my voice and follow my lead. Because if he healed people the same way, the same thing, we'd be doing the same thing every time. Okay, well, I'm going to pray exactly the same way at the exact same time and do this. And God's like, no. I want your heart. I want to hear your voice. I want you to hear my voice. My sheep know my voice. So we press in, and we listen, and we hear God, and we let him shake up our lives, and we let him get inside where it's hard. You guys are that war room crowd, and that prayer, take that heart of stone and change it out into a heart of flesh. Ezekiel. Mark and Dallas and I got to experience that this week in the physical, not the heart level, but we're digging a trench because we have to put in a French drain because of all the water that comes down the hill to our house. And we thought, I was like, yeah, we've dug trenches before. This is no problem. It's about 100 feet long. I can knock this out. So I get out there with the shovel, and I'm like, yeah, the first, inch or two is no problem. Guess what's underneath all that? Really, really hard clay. Really hard clay. So I was out there with the pick and all that, and I'm going to town, and I worked probably about 6 or 7 hours, and Mark worked about an hour, and we made about 10 feet. Because, it's a drain, so you got to go 2 feet down and about 1.5 foot across. We made about 10 feet. I was like, this is stupid. Mark's like, yeah, when we did this over here, we used a jackhammer. I'm like, ding. Hills flat, here we come. So we got that same drill we used on the windows. Yeah, we were out there, bam, 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 bam. Yeah. And in the next 7 hours, we got almost all of it done. And it was a great illustration for me of when we try to do it on ourselves and we try to get ourselves prepared. You can make progress, but it's very slow. It's very tedious. And you get frustrated. But when you let God come in and you let God work on you, He's like that drill. Yeah, it takes some time and it takes effort, but man, you move a whole lot faster and you get the job done. So we want to be preparing ourselves by letting God speak to us. We want to be preparing ourselves by being in the Word. We want to be preparing ourselves by prayer. And when I say prayer, I know you guys are good at this, but just a reminder, prayer is not a laundry list. Oh God, I need this to happen. I need this to happen. Oh God, make this work in my life. Do this. But prayer is a two-way communication. Hey God, what do you have for me today? And then we do the hard part. We sit and listen. Because in our world, in our culture, sitting and listening it's a luxury. We don't do it well anymore. Everything is fed to us. All the entertainment is fed to us, and it's constant barrage of media. Whether it's our phones or the TV or whatever, we're just used to coming in, and we don't know how to sit anymore and just listen. But God's saying, this is how you get better. This is how you get moved. This is how you get prepared. By hearing my voice and letting me speak to you. So that's my challenge this week. Not just for you, but for myself. Do we start getting ourselves ready? Do we start digging in? Do we start letting God say, this is what I want? I believe God's going to do a mighty move through this nation. But it's up to us to do our part. So God does a mighty move in Colfax. I would hate to look back 10 years from now and say, yeah, that was a great mighty move of God, and we didn't experience it. Or we saw it on video. I want to stand before God and Him say, well done, good and faithful servant. You ushered in, you helped usher in this many people. Can you imagine if you got in front of God and He said, yeah, you led a busy life and you missed your moment? So I'm going to pray. I know this doesn't happen often, but we're going to be out early. We're going to have communion, yeah. Lord, I just pray right now that you start to move on our hearts.